out here on TVNB. Jim Hennessy alongside of Barry Johnson. Hope you had a good weekend, and hope you had a good weekend as too, man.
Not too bad.
Yeah, all right.
Not bad at all.
We'll discuss that at a later date.
Sure thing.
Let's get right to it. Big news, of course. Former Flames head coach Bill Stewart makes history. He becomes the first head coach for the St. John Flames to get a head coaching job in the NHL. Mike Milbury steps down, says that the boys just won't play for him anymore. He's having a hard time trying to get them motivated, and the Islanders have had a long losing slump since November. They've picked up a couple of wins here and there, looked like flashes of brilliance, then all of a sudden fallen back into the tank. So he said he's going to go back upstairs, concentrate on the GM's job. Bill Stewart's got the reins. How do you think he'll do?
Well, he weaved a little magic here in St. John, so I think he'll do just fine in the Islanders organization. So he's been in there now for 3, 4, 5 months now, and he's getting a feel of what has to be done and what's already been done and what has to be toned up and things like that. So I think he'll do all right there. But also we should make mention that he's looking for an assistant coach right now, and all eyes are on Jeff Perry right now. He wants Jeff Perry as his assistant.
That seems to be the word, and I think that would be a good combination. I mean, Bill and Jeff weaved some great magic together in their drive to the Calder Cup last year, so I think it would be a perfect fit. But you had a chance to hear the interview that Aaron did with Aaron Kennedy, of course, the voice of the St. John Flames, that Aaron did with Jeff Perry over the weekend. I didn't get a chance to hear it. Give us the details.
Well, it was basically, it's more of the Calgary thing, the same as Bill Stewart. What are you going to give us if we give you him? And
sure.
I think with Jeff Perry's contract, he's playing out the last of his players' contract that he had.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think if it comes down to a dollar figure, it probably isn't that much, but Calgary's going to want something in return, obviously, for letting him go.
No question.
And Jeff's quite excited. He wants to get down there and get into the NHL and be an assistant, and maybe someday, he'll fill into a head coaching job too. So.
Well, I mean, that's what you strive for. I mean, Jeff unfortunately had some injuries and, couldn't play as long as he wanted to. Had to retire quite a few years before I think he would have liked to have. But, I mean, he fitted very nicely in the assistant coach's job. He's done a great job here. Whether there's much movement for him to make the jump up to Calgary, I don't think there's any movement for the next couple of years. So, hey, why not? I mean, the players play so they can progress to that next level, and that's exactly what the coaches do as well. So we wish Jeff all the best in that endeavor. Let's get to the Flames. Kind of a rough week for the boys as they kicked off their 5-game road swing, a 7-1 shellacking at the hands of Rochester to start off the road swing. Then Friday night in Hamilton, they rebound with a nice 4-1 win. Saturday night in Hamilton, different story. The Bulldogs come back and beat them 3-1. Let's talk about the 3 people that have returned from Calgary: Tyler Moss, Chris Dingman, and Nat Domicelli. Didn't seem to play that much of a role with them getting shellacked 7-1 against Rochester.
We should also add Jaguar was down for Saturday night's game in Hamilton as the backup to Tyler Moss, just kind of sitting there feeling things out right now. But so that kind of makes 4 into the fold, but you never see the backup goaltender out there playing. So.
Exactly.
But I don't know. Don McKelly obviously was a dominant factor in the 3-1 loss on Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
He got a goal, and he looked pretty good out there. So.
Sure.
But I don't know. I just don't think there's any room for him in Calgary. He's not in Calgary's plans. I think with the expansion coming up, I think he's just holding his own, biting his tongue and saying, well, I'll wait. I'll have my last laugh with you guys. So.
Sure.
And Dingman, I don't know. I think Dingman's more of an AHL player. I think they had him up there in Calgary because he is a 6'3", somewhere in that area, 230 pounds in that general area.
Absolutely.
And that's a dominant force out on the ice when you don't have a legitimate tough guy in the lineup. He's their tough guy, I guess, right now, and Rocky's not there.
No question. Tyler Moss looked. I mean, he hadn't played in 2 months, so I mean, you can't blame him for that. I mean, he looked very rusty again in that game against Rochester.
Well, according to the play-by-play, he had nobody in front of him, so. He didn't have much help out there, but in the 4-1 win, he definitely had some help out there. And a lot of the players fed off of that, too, which kind of helps. But they just ran into a hot Steve Passmore on Saturday night. I mean, Steve faced 40 shots in that game, and Tyler Moss only handled 18, so that's not a whole lot. And out of those 18 shots, 3 of them went in. So
exactly.
So, it's hard to get into a rhythm there, and you get kind of cold.
Well, especially when he hasn't played in a couple of months, too, due to that injury. But the goaltending circle, as they call it, continues to revolve here and up in Calgary as well. You had a chance to sit down and talk to Flames head coach Rick Vaive a couple of weeks ago. Tell us a little bit about what that interview was all about.
He was more or less talking about the season, how it's up and down, and how they did have some points in the bank. At that time, they had 32 points, and they were just kind of sitting on that cushion. But now those 32 points have come and gone. A lot of teams have gone ahead of them. Portland's gone ahead of them. Fredericton's gone ahead of them. And there's no chance right now for them to catch Lowell. So right now they're just trying to stay ahead of Portland, sorry. And actually the Leafs have passed them, and the Portland's in the bottom.
The Leafs have passed them. What do we got? We've got Lowell, Fredericton, the Leafs, Flames,
and then Portland.
And then Portland. And
so it's pretty tough right now, but I think they'll come through. I mean, they're only 5 points behind Fredericton right now, so it is fairly close, and they do have
what do they got?
8 games
in hand. Yeah.
With Fredericton, so
yeah.
You know, there's 16 points that could be made right there if they can get all wins out of those.
Exactly. And we had a chance to, or I should say, Barrett, you had a chance to sit down.
Sorry, we'll change that again. Aaron. Sorry about that. Aaron talked to Rick Vive? Aaron talked to Rick Vive.
Aaron talked to Rick Vive. Sorry about that. We'll give Mr. Kennedy his due when it is due. He had a chance to sit down and talk to Rick Vive about a week ago, and his feelings on MLG shutting its doors. Of course, Rick Vive played with the Toronto Maple Leafs, was the captain for that team for many years. So here's what Rick Vive had to say about the closing down of Maple Leaf Gardens.
4 weeks from tonight, Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto will close its doors. The Chicago Blackhawks will be in town to take on the Maple Leafs, and the following Saturday night on February the 20th, the Air Canada Centre will be opened as the Canadians will come to town to take on the Maple Leafs. And to talk about the closing of Maple Leaf Gardens, we're joined by St. John Flames head coach Rick Vive, certainly someone who has a lot of memories from that old building in the heart of downtown Toronto. And let's go way back and maybe take me through the first time you stepped foot in MLG.
Well, it was, I mean, I played there when I was with Vancouver, and that was quite a thrill to go in there and be on Hockey Night in Canada and everything else. And knowing that when I was a kid, I used to watch that all the time, and knowing that all my friends and family back home would be watching, and just the aura of Maple Leaf Gardens, looking around and seeing the bunker where you used to see Harold Ballard and King Clancy sitting. It was very unique, and it was a real unbelievable experience. And then when I got traded there, well, I mean, that was just too much. To be able to practice here on a daily basis and play there all the time was, it was really a phenomenal thing to get that opportunity.
Yeah, and it's almost like being there for the first time twice, if there is such a thing, because being there in enemy uniforms and then being there wearing a maple leaf on the front of your jersey has to be that much more exciting.
Well, it was, and although we had some tough times when I was there, and crowds not always on your side during some of the times when I played in Toronto, but still that didn't matter. It was a thrill just playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I mean, there was just something about that building. There was something about all the original 6 buildings, Boston Garden, Chicago Stadium, the Montreal Forum. There was just something special about all those original buildings that you used to watch all these superstars play in when you were a kid.
And it's not so much the buildings, I think, but you talked about the crowd, and sometimes it could be hostile against the Leafs if things weren't going well. And maybe that's one of the biggest things about those old buildings and about those cities. The fans are knowledgeable, and certainly with the places that the National Hockey League has expanded to, and even to a certain extent this league in the last few years. I can remember last season being in Lexington, Kentucky, when there'd be a whistle and the announcer would come on and say offside or icing just to let the fans know what's going on, and that certainly wasn't the case in Boston or Montreal or certainly in Toronto.
No, there's no question. I mean, they knew what they were watching, and they knew about the game, and of course they all went through good winning times as well. So the fans would get spoiled at times, and I mean, they knew when you went through tough times, they'd let you know it, but they were right there behind you when you went through good times, and they were jumping up and down off the bandwagon a lot, but still, that was just part of it because they knew the game of hockey.
It's probably not a fair question to ask, you know, for specific memories, but I'll do it anyhow. I mean, what are some of the things about Maple Leaf Gardens that spring immediately to mind when you think back?
Well, I guess the very first time, and as funny as it may sound, but the distinct voice of the announcer that you used to hear on Hockey Night in Canada was still there when I was there, and when he would announce your name, it's like, you know, used to hear in the old days, you know, it's, and I can do a pretty good job of it, but I won't.
Go ahead.
Well, no, it's just, I mean, it's a unique, you know, Maple Leaf goal scored by number 27, Daryl Sittler, you know, and then to hear him say that number 22, Rick Vive, I mean, it was a special feeling, and of course, when I scored 50 goals the first time a Maple Leaf had ever done that, which, you know, I didn't really know until I got about 44, and then people started talking about it. I said, what's the big deal? And, well, no one's ever done it. And it was like, you know, all the great players that have played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and no one has ever scored 50 goals. It was astounding to me that it had never happened.
You talked about Daryl Sittler, and before you arrived with the Maple Leafs organization, I mean, he scored 10 points in a game, and you think back even to the late 80s when there were an awful lot of goals being scored, and Wayne Gretzky had 212 points one season, but that has never been accomplished. A couple of guys have come close. With 8 points, Gretzky's done it twice. Mario Lemieux had done it twice as well. No one's ever scored 9, but 10 points in a game, that's probably a record that, even though Maple Leaf Gardens won't be around forever, that Daryl Sittler record probably will be.
Well, I would say there's a better than average chance that may hold up for a long, long time, but I think like every other record that we've seen, I don't think anybody ever thought anybody in the National Hockey League would score 200 points. I mean, that was so far out there that it was just never even thought of, and then all of a sudden Gretzky does it, and now, it's just, you cannot say never, but I think it's a record that will hold up for a long, long time. 10 points is an awful lot of points, and I think the days of the high-scoring games for this period of time, anyway, this era, are over. I mean, it's more good defensive, low-scoring hockey right now.
What about the days of playing under the Harold Ballard regime, and that's probably the best word to use to describe it, and how he used to sit in that little perch and watch the game, something that has since been boarded up just because it wouldn't be the same without him, but, what are some of your memories of that?
Well, it was just, everybody saw things from the outside, and I know Harold took a lot of abuse about the way he ran things and so on and so forth, but that was what he wanted people to perceive, I think, on the outside. And although he had his times where the Daryl Sittler incident where he squabbled with Daryl and maybe didn't handle that one properly, and there's probably a few other things he didn't handle right, but overall he was a pretty good guy, and he treated us pretty good, and all he did basically was say things off the cuff and do things to stay on the front page of the sports. People don't realize that. He felt that if he was on the front page of the sports, then his teams were going to sell tickets and they were going to do well, and then he did, because he did a good job of that.
And as long as he was on the front page of the papers, he wanted to make sure that things were somewhat flattering, and the same thing with the electronic media. And, people from my point of view in this business remember when Dave Hodge was just unceremoniously told that you're not coming to the games anymore, you're out.
Well, like I said, he just did what he wanted to do, and a lot of times he didn't care what people thought. That was one thing, and but overall, I gotta say he was a good-hearted person, and he did a lot of things for charity that people don't know about, and overall, I liked him. I mean, you can't help but like the guy. He said so many things off the cuff that were just, you couldn't believe it, and but he was a boss, he was paying the bills, and he felt that he had the right to do so, and I guess when you're paying the bills, you do.
Listening to some people in Toronto and reading the papers lately, it seems now that after games, the fans don't want to leave Maple Leaf Gardens. They want to stand around, and even after the players have left the ice, and just, sort of soak in the aura of that building. I've been there a couple of times, once for a National Hockey League game. What are your feelings now? I know with the closing just a couple of weeks away, as we mentioned, February the 13th, and I know that next week when the Flames are traveling in Southern Ontario, Headline Sports wants to talk to you. People want to know what your thoughts are on the closing of Maple Leaf Gardens. As you mentioned, the first 50-goal scorer in Leafs history and the youngest captain in Leafs history. Is there any melancholy as far as Rick Vive is concerned that they're going to shut the doors?
Well, I don't think there's any question. Although people didn't want to stay around when I was playing there, in fact, they were half gone by the time before the game was over. But it's a special place. It really is. There's no question it's got a special place in my history, in my heart. And I had my best years in Toronto. I had a lot of fond memories of Maple Leaf Gardens, and it's the last of the old buildings, the ones with the aura, and it's unfortunate. It really is. Although I think, at least in Toronto, what they've done, I think with the new building, is built it so that the fans would be on top of the action, much the same as the old buildings, and from what I understand. But there'll never be another Maple Leaf Gardens or Boston Garden or Chicago Stadium, and it's sad to see those old buildings close, but economics dictate that they have to close, and they have to have bigger buildings to pay the bills, and it's part of life. But Maple Leaf Gardens will be missed by a lot of people.
you plan to watch, perhaps on highlights, the closing? I know a lot of people sometimes just don't even like to be associated with something like that, where they consider it to be bad and a sad occasion. They just prefer to be immune to it. I know the Flames are playing that particular night that Maple Leaf Gardens will close, but you expect to watch the highlight reels and maybe rent the video when it comes out after?
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for my ticket and my airline ticket to go to that game, but no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I definitely will. It's something, like I said, that's very special and dear to me, and but I also understand that in these times, economics are a big part of the game, and it's a matter of time, and it's surprising that it's lasted this long, to be honest with you, with all the new buildings being built. But I will definitely have to watch and see the closing and the opening of the new building, and get. I'm sure they'll come out with commemorative tapes and all that, and I'm certainly going to be trying to buy those so I can look back on that, and my children someday can look back on it when maybe I can get them up to the Air Canada Centre and say, well, this is the old building, and there'll be a big difference, and they can look at those tapes.
That's Rick Vive with his reflections on life at Maple Leaf Gardens. The building will close on February the 13th against the Chicago Blackhawks. The Air Canada Centre opens the following week, February the 20th, against the Montreal Canadiens.
Anything at all. He's that strong.
Joe Schuster, will you stop it or you'll miss your train? Now help me find number 5.
Strong, but by day he's a mild-mannered reporter. Glasses, a secret identity.
Honestly, you Canadian kids.
He'd be in this cape.
A what?
A cape, wearing these blue tights.
A hero in tights, really. Here it is.
Listen, Lois, this guy is faster than anything, I swear.
If you're not fast, you're going to miss your train.
That's it. A bullet. He's faster. No, he's faster than a speeding bullet.
Come on, get on it. No one's going to read a comic strip about a strong man in tights, Joe. It'll never fly.
Why? No. But he can leap over tall buildings. Oh, wow, yeah.
See what your cousin Frank says in Toronto.
Wait, Lois. I've got something for you. Take it. It's a gift. You never know. It might be worth something someday. Is he great or what? Bye-bye, Lois.
Capture the lights, camera, and action of New Brunswick on Plugged In, your exclusive eye on the arts, music, and entertainment scene. Zoom in Wednesday nights at 9:30 or Fridays at 7, only on TVNB. Bring the working life of New Brunswickers to the table with labor-oriented discussions. Thursdays at 10 and Saturdays at 5 on Channel 10, TVNB.
Punching the Clock is sponsored by the Workers' Investment Fund.
And welcome back into the second half of Time Out here on TVNB. Jim Hennessy alongside Barry Johnston. All-Star Weekend in the NHL. I was reading some interesting facts. What they did was they had a bowl session Saturday night before the skills competition. They did a poll from Newfoundland to Vancouver, and here's how some of the numbers broke down. 15% of people watch hockey at least once a week, whereas 56% don't watch the game at all. Do you agree with those? Well, I mean, obviously these numbers are factual. The NHL spent a lot of money into this poll and this survey. It was 1,400 people surveyed from Newfoundland to Vancouver. 15% watch it at least more than once. 56% don't watch it at all and don't care if they ever see a hockey game on TV or not. Now, this is male, female. I believe it was between the ages of 18 and 34 that they polled these people. Can we now say that hockey is still Canada's game?
Definitely. 1,400 people is not even 1/100th of our population. I mean, let's face it, 1,400 people. I mean, Mr. Bettman, you better redo that poll, because
yeah, but still,
who were they actually polling? Where were these people? Did they go into the rinks and poll these people?
They went into the rinks, construction workers, business people, I mean...
A lot of business people watch hockey.
Right from the blue collar right down to, the guy who is at the rink cleaning the ice.
I just don't think that the poll is accurate, that's all.
The numbers are staggering. I mean, when I heard them, 15% of people watch hockey, at least try to sit down once a week, more than likely Saturday night, and watch the game. 56% said they don't watch it all, and they don't care if they ever see a game.
I could see 56% of the people saying we don't watch a complete game, but not watch a game at all. I mean, myself, I'll flip through the channels, watch some of the Ottawa game on Sportsnet or something like that, but
sure.
I don't sit and watch the whole game. I'll get tidbits here and there, and I'll flip the channel and watch something else. But I do watch hockey on TV, and I just don't know. I mean, you could interview 1,400 people in this city, and you're going to get 100% saying, yeah, we watch hockey on TV, because there's not much else to do. So.
I just thought it was interesting because, I mean, they had owners, people who work in the media, general managers, agents, all sitting around in this big bull session. And McLean, of course, was taking the reins, and he was asking the questions. I thought it was a really neat idea. 90 minutes they had to sit there, and, the Canadian teams give their beef about, why they can't make any money or compete with the U.S. dollars, and the American teams giving their side of the coin. So it was a pretty interesting thing to see before the skills competition, of course. The big news, a couple of big stories come out this week. Pavel Bure finally gets traded. Brian Burke pulls the trigger with Florida. Two of the big names, really. There were a couple other people, some draft picks exchanged. Ed Jovanovski from Florida goes to Vancouver. And, of course, Pavel Bure with an instant impact in Florida. 2 games, 3 goals. The Russian Rocket looks like he's back to play.
Just like he never missed a step at all playing. He's playing phenomenal right now. Ed Jovanovski will bolster the blue line in Vancouver. But it seems like there's some other turmoil problems in Vancouver right now with Mike Keenan supposedly on his way out, and there's no real truth. We don't have any confirmation on any of that right now, but the rumor is that Mark Crawford may be going to Colorado or to Vancouver, but he's still under contract with Colorado, so there'll be some big buying out of the contract there.
He'd have to buy out Keenan, and his contract, I think, is about $1.4 million. Crawford's is pretty close to the $1 million mark with Colorado, so they'd have to compensate Colorado plus compensate Keenan, then give Crawford a new contract, which Crawford's not going to sign for anything less than $1 million, I wouldn't guess. But that's probably the way it's going to break down. The interesting thing, how this story all broke, and Gary Bettman can't be too happy about this because, of course, when All-Star Weekend rolls around, it's all, oh, the game's great, the players are great, it's good to be here, it's great to be playing in the NHL. Brian Burke was supposed to be in this bowl session that Hockey Night in Canada had as part of the ownership. He wasn't there. It was the only empty seat sitting there. Ron McLean made mention of it, and then, of course, they made mention that the story was breaking, that Burke was heading back to Vancouver. They had a chance to talk to Mike Keenan, and Keenan is a little upset, and I can understand from his point of view why. He said that he hasn't been in touch with Brian Burke. He's been trying to get a hold of Brian Burke, and no one has returned his phone calls. Is Burke going a little power hungry out there? I mean, it just seems like with the Bure trade, it took so long to happen, the bad blood between him and Bure, and now the bad blood that seems to be coming to the surface between him and Keenan. What's this guy thinking about?
Well, if Burke's getting into a power struggle with somebody, he's locking horns with the best in the league with Mike Keenan, so I mean, he doesn't get called Iron Mike for nothing there. But I don't think, I think Mike Keenan, I think the players are kind of getting sick of his iron rule, I guess, because as it has been everywhere Mike Keenan's been, St. Louis or wherever. It's just been it's been that way, and that's why Mike Keenan doesn't stay in one spot very long as a head coach. So.
Sure. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Of course, when we go to tape, when we tape this show, we still hadn't gotten all the details on the Keenan trade. So hopefully next week we'll have all the details, have all the contracts sorted out, and we can sit down and talk about it a little bit. Final note of the week: we should make mention that Roger Clemens is back in the news. I don't know what this guy's thinking about. Now, all of a sudden, reports say he will go to Houston, when he first said there's no way that he's ever going to go to Houston. And then another report says he might want to stay in Toronto and finish out his 2-year deal. What's going on with this guy?
Well, he says he's happy either way. Either if he goes to Houston, he'd like to go to Houston now because I think that's the only team that's really interested in him right now.
That will pay the money for this guy.
Exactly. And Toronto, he say, well, I'd stay in Toronto too, but whether Gordash wants him to stay in Toronto is another story. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
I just can't figure out what's going on with this guy. I mean, 1 minute it's, I want to play for a contender. Obviously, the main focus on his mind, and you hate to say this because, I mean, he is a team player and he's an awful good pitcher. Listen to me. He is probably one of the best pitchers of all time, five Cy Young Awards. And but I just get the feeling that with the Blue Jay fans, me being one, I'm getting sort of a bad taste in my mouth about this whole thing. One minute he's for the team, the next minute he wants to go play for a contender, and now all of a sudden, because he tested that free market, nobody seems to want him because of the cash that he's trying to tally. Now all of a sudden he's like, well, I guess Toronto wouldn't be too bad of a place to stay and finish up my career. I don't know. It's just I'm a little confused about this whole thing, but Gordash, I'm sure the baseball meetings, a couple more coming up, he'll try to ballyhoo him around somewhere and see if somebody will pick him up, but it'll be interesting to see. Any final notes?
I'd just like to make mention, Saturday night I had the pleasure of doing a play-by-play for the AAA Girls High School All-Star Game in Fredericton. And anybody who's never seen girls hockey at that level, it's quite interesting to watch. It's a little scrambly, but the talent is definitely there, and they're quite competitive for a bunch of females out there, I guess, is to put it nicely. That it was the goaltending was the show that night. It
1-0 game, wasn't it?
It was a 1-0 game,
yeah.
And it was a what we may call a garbage goal. It was just jamming at the net, and and trying to get that loose puck underneath the goaltender into the twine. So it was a very good, interesting hockey game. And anybody who hasn't got a chance to see girls hockey, high school hockey, should get out and see it. We have lots of teams in the local area. KV has a team, Rossay has a team, St. John High has a team. And a lot of players from this area were in the All-Star game. It was the Southwestern Conference, and they just divided them up into 2 teams.
Playing full schedule. It's good to see the girls out there playing some good heads-up hockey. Also, we want to make mention that I believe it's coming up Wednesday night, 7 o'clock at the LBR, the Metro Gents All-Star Game, be the City Gents League against the Metro Gents League. So if you get a chance, drop down and check out some of that All-Star action in the Metro Gents League All-Star Game, 7 o'clock at the LBR. And that's going to do it for us. Thanks for coming by, Matt.
No trouble.
We'll talk to you again next Monday night at 6 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you have yourself a great week.